Again, for the record, my name is Arnold from West Hartford, and to preface my remarks, I'd like to point out that I've been involved with emergency preparedness my entire life, most recently with an FBI program to protect critical telecommunications infrastructure. I also hold multiple Armor's level certifications for different military weapons platforms, and am therefore able to speak with authority on several subjects on 1076. Although I don't expect the members of this panel to be armorers, you must, however, be at least reasonably knowledgeable on the subject of guns. Your enrolling in Guns 101 was a good first step, but as any teacher can tell you, you need to attend class more than one day to know a subject. Every child is taught early on in life not to judge a book by its cover, yet unbelievably that's exactly what is being proposed in 1076. The woman that's from West Hartford that spoke a few minutes ago implored you to ban military-style weapons. However, she, as well as none of the other folks that asked the same thing, ever said why, ever gave a reason why. And that's in contrast to my personal knowledge and expertise that allows me to challenge anyone to disprove the statement that a military-style gun is any more powerful, any more accurate, has a longer range, or can fire any faster than a plain hunting rifle that takes the same cartridge. And as an aside, most handguns can fire rounds faster than the feared assault rifle that many want to ban. This is an interesting situation with this panel in that it's not just about adding additional laws, but here's an opportunity to actually correct some of the mistakes from the past. There have been, with the attempt to define an assault rifle, features taken away from guns that have actually made their operation less safe. And this is a perfect opportunity, once you get further education and understand what these features are, to reverse this. Education is also very important with regard to what you call high-capacity magazines. I'd love to hear from even a single member of this panel as to what empirical data was used to come up with 10 rounds as a magic number. It would be truly sad if the reason was that some other state picked 10, so you blindly decided to imitate them. Make no mistake, there are true high-capacity magazines, and I submit those would be appropriate for special treatment, but the ones identified in this bill are not those. Intuitively, a smaller number of rounds would logically seem safer, but in practice it doesn't work out that way, and a lower number of rounds can actually make things even worse. Inadvertently, you have caused gun owners to more and more securely lock up their weapons, which is not a bad thing, but in making these weapons harder to get to, even in an emergency situation, you can't then add a further impediment by then requiring that same person to grab 3 magazines under duress rather than a single one as they can now. Finally, with regard to the outright banning of body armor, you're proposing a blanket prohibition as if there were no legitimate civilian uses for it. If you thought Adam Lanza was wearing body armor, he was in fact wearing a non-ballistic tactical vest, not body armor. And unless anyone on this panel can tell me what the difference between the two is, then again, you need further education. I previously offered to educate members of this committee in a classroom setting, and again I ask for just 1 hour of your time so that you can obtain a better working knowledge of the legislation you are charged with. And it would be interesting to also include in that session the Connecticut Anti-Gun Violence Group, because I think additional knowledge on their part would be helpful for everyone.
Thank you, Mr. Chase. Do we have any questions for Mr. Chase from members of the committee? Yes, Senator.
Thank you for being with us this evening, as all of our signed-up speakers. And so it is true that one session doesn't make for an expert, nor even begins to scratch the surface of those who have for years been proficient in firearms. And so I'm the first one to recognize that, and don't ever expect that I could ever measure up. all I am attempting to do is in a very short period of time, because there isn't a lot of time here, understand as much as I possibly can, i.e. today's session, however long this may go. And you have all been very instructive, each in your own ways and each with your own expertise, either prepared or strictly off the cuff and from your life's experience. In one of the hearings that we had previously, Mr. Chase, actually one of the members from Newtown, a mother, in fact, from whose daughter was one of the teachers in the classroom, testified that 11 of the children, and I'm not sure how this information came to her, other than the fact that she was a member of the community and very close to someone who was right there. My mic is on. Anyway, she testified that 11 of the kids got out of that classroom when the shooter had to rearm and change the magazine. And she testified that those 11 kids ran out of that room and ran almost a quarter of a mile to someone's house. But it was that interval that allowed them to move, and I guess his eyes to come off of them. Once again, this is by virtue of secondhand testimony, but it kind of makes sense. And the state police also then, in my 101 session, and a lot of my colleagues were there, and they've done this a number of times with us, testified that the large capacity magazines also have a great tendency to jam.
Exactly.
And therefore, if that's the case, then the lower capacity magazine may, in terms of the enthusiasts and so forth, serve the same purpose. And in the case of a shooter, serve the purpose of breaking up the act.
In theory, and I know that the theory you're working on, the time in changing out a magazine allows someone to escape. The fallacy of that is that we know the high-capacity magazines have jammed and have stopped some of these mass shootings. By limiting the availability of magazines to, pardon me, just low-capacity magazines, i.e. 10-round magazines, there's a guarantee that those magazines will never jam. Furthermore, some of the state police demonstrations that were given were really rigged. And I hate to put it that way, but and I saw the video of the demonstration. And what they did is they fired as fast as they possibly could and then changed the magazine, rather than the typical aim, fire, aim, fire, aim, fire. And that changes the ratio between the time it takes to change a magazine and the firing time. It's analogous to if you went on a 1-minute car trip and then stopped for 5 minutes to refuel with gas. The ratio between the refueling and the trip would be very different if you went on a 2-hour drive and then took 5 minutes to refuel. So you have to be very careful, and that's where this education session I was talking about earlier would point out these things and let you identify some of the flaws. But there are other things that can be done, even if a shooter were limited to a 10-round magazine. There are metal clamps that clamp 2 magazines together. So in changing, I mean, literally you can go fire, change, fire, without skipping a beat. You can outlaw those clamps, and then a piece of duct tape can serve the same purpose. So there are always ways around it, but a competent shooter can change magazines during the target selection process. What we saw in Newtown was extraordinary and unique. Instead of a shooter trying to pick off target after target, you had a sick individual pump 10, 11, 12 rounds into a child at point-blank range. So, it's a very unique situation. The reality is, and I would love to allow you and your panel to see a demonstration or a video of real-world scenarios. In other words, if there was an active shooting scene in this room right now, and you were waiting for your time to escape, you wouldn't wait 1 second. You would have to wait 2 seconds, 3 seconds, until you had a good feeling that something was wrong, and then you'd try to make your escape. If a magazine change can be accomplished in less than that time, you know, it's in theory, it's great, but in practice, it doesn't happen.
Well, that was the testimony that we had, that was the interval that allowed those kids to get out of that room. And yes, I understand that there is nothing that we will ever come up with, and I don't think anyone ever presumes that we would to address every for instance. That's just doesn't work in any legislation.
Sure. No, I appreciate what
and
you're
so you
saying.
just try to do the best that you can reasonably.
And again, if a normal mass shooting situation was target, 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 but if someone is so crazy to want to shoot 12 rounds, then that takes, with a semi-automatic, close to 8 seconds or so to accomplish that. So that gives someone a chance to run. You have no idea if he had his magazines in a pack he had to unload or what have you. So you can't take a single instance. You need to look in general at the realities, and that's really why the fallacy of the load cap magazine.
Well, I just thought.
No, I appreciate it. Good question. Yes.
You know, I mean,
Yes.
we have to weigh everything. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Representative?
Mr. Chase, welcome. Appreciate you taking the time to come here this evening to testify. I think we could all agree that as a result of Sandy Hook, people in this state are looking for this legislature to do something, to have some sort of response. And we've heard the phrase that all eyes are on this, or all eyes in the country are in the state of Connecticut and this body to respond and to do something. What that something is, time will tell. And I certainly appreciate your response in talking about the mechanics of how these different magazines work and providing us with additional information and open that up. But I guess my question is, maybe it's unfair, but my question would be is that if you were confronted by a family member who had to go through a similar tragedy in Newtown, and they came to you and said, you know, what can you do to help us? How would you respond to that? And that's a question that I get often. And it's not any simple answer, but I was just wondering if you had something in mind or what your response might be to a question like that.
And again, another good question. You know, in a situation like that, any psychologist would tell you the loss of a child is the worst possible scenario, you know, more than the loss of a parent, more than the loss of a spouse that anyone can go through. So emotions are just tremendous in that kind of situation. If you're asking how I would respond, I would have to say that I would respond as I normally do on empirical data. In other words, the worst thing in the world is to guess. The worst thing in the world is just to shoot from the hip. I would want to know that anything that I did would really work. And furthermore, I'd want to know that what I did didn't have unintended consequences, you know, such as what was done in 1994, where features were taken away that made it more difficult for the average person to maintain good control. Now, if you realize that day-to-day use of those safety features that were deleted represents 99.999+% of the gun operations versus a 1 in a million Newtown type of situation, you know, do you let the tail wag the dog? And you know, again, whatever whatever I would gravitate toward would really be meaningful. And any statement, as I said earlier, I want to be challenged at any statement that I make, because I can back it up with data, I can back it up with a demonstration. So that's how I would respond.
I just wanted to make sure that we weren't missing anything, and that if you did have something, I'd certainly be interested. The one last question I have is, I've heard in my discussions and talking with pro-gun people that it's very common for them to say that all the legislation that they've seen thus far is misguided because it's directed at the instrument and not the person. And I was wondering what your thoughts would be on that.
Well, unlike, even though I'm an NRA Life member, I don't agree with a lot of what they say. 1076 has some good things in it. There are the background checks, the more positive locking up of guns, things like that. There are definitely positive things. And the gun itself, again, if there is a valid change that is made, valid laws, that would be one thing. If as 1076 is proposing, you all of a sudden make a legal gun an illegal gun because there's a hole in the stock so you can put your thumb in there, I have no idea why such a thing would ever be proposed. And I can only guess that someone's trying to say that if there's a stock that's more comfortable to hold, then if a crazy person shoots up a place, they're slightly less likely to be accurate. But there's so much nonsense, and I hate to say it, but and that's what we all have to get away from. I mean, we're all working toward the same goal. None of us want to see another Newtown. And the real question is, how do we do it effectively? Not, we want to have this or that done, but no backup as to what it would really accomplish.
Again, thank you for your testimony.
Quite welcome. And thank you for your now 24 years of service for West Hartford.
Any other questions from members of the committee? If not, thank you, Mr. Chase, and thank you for waiting so long.